Welcome everybody
All right.
to How to Fix Your Art, How to Train Your Art, How to Train Your Dragon. What is this? In case you don't know who we are, we're Jake, Will, and Lee from 3 Point Perspective podcast, from SVS Learn, and from our individual illustration careers. We've been doing this monthly challenge where people submit their art. Sprinkled into that, there was always these, as Lee calls them, teachable moments. Like we would see a trend where poses were really bad, or colors were really bad, or compositions weren't up to snuff. And so we take a session and just teach and do critiques specifically on here's how these things could be better, here's how things could get fixed. And then Will had this brilliant idea: we should just do a thing called How to Fix Your Art, where we just pick a topic and we go and fix some art on that topic. So that's what we're doing here. This is a little bit about what this is. We have dug into the Critique Arena archives and we found some different pieces that we want to fix. And today's focus is posing. So the way this is going to work is, first we will give a short mini lecture on posing. I don't know if it's mini or short, but I prepared something. I'll just burn through it. And then we'll get to actually fixing some artwork. So you could see how a piece of art goes from not being, the best it could be, to at least us giving it a chance to be the best it could be. Really that's going to be up to you once you take the, the teaching advice that we give you. All right. How to fix your art, poses. First things first. There's 3 simple steps. And if you're ever at a loss for how do I even do a pose? How do I get into it? I want you to think first of line of action, then second, shape and line, and then volume. Okay. And that's all it is. I'll just run through these really quick. Line of action is a simple line where the entire character's body is following one specific direction. And in the bad poses that we see, there's no clear line of action. Number 2, shape and line. That's when you start working off of that line. You start building out, fleshing out this character. So you're going to start adding shapes. You're going to start adding lines to really figure out where that character is going. And then lastly, once those shapes and lines are in there, you're going to give this character volume. You're going to give it actual tangibleness to it. So you're going to go in and add, a little bit more details, specific details, like lines around, waists and arms and implying clothing, hairlines, eye lines, things like that. Okay. So those are the 3 simple steps: line of action, shape and line, volume, in that order. And I want to dig into those a little bit more, a little deeper. Okay. So the first thing is line of action. And with line of action, you've got 3 sort of things I want to emphasize on there: the swoop, the S, and pushing the action. So first things first is the swoop. The swoop is a single line that kind of goes in a curve, right? It could be straight, it could be really curved, but essentially you have these 2 options, the S and the swoop. And I want to focus on the swoop first. The swoop first is probably the most prevalent that you're going to have. And this implies one specific way for this character to be moving, how it holds itself, the energy that this character's, the direction of energy that this character has. Okay, so we're going to build on that, just these 3 simple things. So now we're adding line and shape on top of that. And so you can see with each of these swoops, we've got this guy here trying to catch a ball. We've got a person just standing there, posing, kind of a confident pose. And then we've got someone who maybe has just picked up a ball or something and is looking at it. And you could see each one of these curves, there's energy going in a direction. One of these is really kinetic, and one of these is kind of confident and firm. And then one of these is very hunched and, kind of introspective in a way, right? But it's all sort of the same curve. You look at all these, pretty much the same curve. It's just how you build off of that can really speak a lot to what this character is doing. Okay, so then we're adding our volume, and you can see here, just building up these shapes a little bit more and showing through these face lines and eye lines, and some of these cross contour lines to define how round these shapes are. We could see where the heads are focused on and where the volume that these arms and legs and torsos have. Okay, so that is the swoop. You could see there again, after everything's built up, that line of action is still flowing through it. And if you're ever getting stuck and you're not sure where you're going with your character pose, just go back to that line of action, draw it right over the top in a different color if you need to. And if you can't find it again, probably need to fix your pose. Okay, this is the S shape. So you can see here the S usually has two opposing curves in it, right? There's a curve that goes one way and then a curve that goes the other way. And just like before, these S poses are oftentimes a little bit more, what I would say, kinetic, or it's more of an action pose. But you can also add a little bit more dynamism into your standing, restful poses. So I included that over here. So here we're just building off of it. Got our circles or shapes going in there, just figuring out, fleshing these things out a little bit more. Now we need to add volume to them. And you can see here now we know where these lines are in space, right? Where these shapes are in space, how much space they take up, how much volume they have. Okay, so that is the S. And then, and you can see here, I just threw these guys in over the top of it. You see that S shape is still happening in those as well. Okay, and then lastly, pushing the action, right? That's one other sort of problem we see in poses, is that the poses aren't pushed far enough. They're really, when your pose isn't good, it's because you're just holding back some. And don't be afraid to just go more extreme or find the more extreme version of the pose. If your character's reaching back to like punch somebody, really have them reach back, right? Or if they're connecting to something, really push that far. Anything in the middle is just going to have less energy to it. So I have here two runners, right? And you got this one, it's more of a vertical line, swoop line. And, it's a fine pose. It works, but, and maybe this is what you want your character doing, just a trot. But if you're drawing a character in a race, kind of like the poses that we're going to be going through today, you really want to show that character running and lunging, and you don't want to bore the viewer. You want them to feel engaged. So that's pushing the action. You could see here I've just added the volume to these guys, and you could see here how just by tilting this swoop over 20 degrees, it gives this character so much more energy. All right, shape and line. This is the next. We've talked about our line of actions. Now shapes and lines. And we got three different things I want to talk about here. This is fleshing out this character, building them up. There's the ball and stick method, there's the flour sack method, and there's the shoulders and hips. And you can use one or all of these. I usually use a version of all of these when I'm building out a character. I'll start with our line of action. I wanted to do a character. We've done a lot of action poses. I want to do a character like just sitting on the ground, right? So I'm adding my balls first, and these are just, usually I'll do a ball for the head and a ball for the hip area, the lower stomach and hips. Especially when you're doing more cartoony characters, you're going to want to use a ball shape for that. And then the sticks, and you just add on these sticks to these two ball shapes. And I usually just leave the arms and legs as these bent sticks. And that's the easiest way to do it. And if your pose isn't working at this stage, it's never going to work. And so the reason you want to stick with balls and sticks is you can get a lot of mileage on the pose with very little effort, because it's just circles and lines. Okay. All right, now that we got the balls and sticks laid in there, we're going to volume this thing up. So I'm adding a little bit more volume. We got this like rabbit character pondering an apple, about to eat an apple, and just chilling on the ground there. And you could see here, just that's all it is. Couple of balls, couple of sticks, and you've got your pose. Couple of balls, couple of sticks, and you got your pose. Here's a guy chasing after a rabbit who's running away. Here's another person just standing there. And again, like I said before, if it's not working at this stage, it'll never work. Your pose will never get where you need it to be. Okay, so we got balls and sticks done. Now let's talk about the flour sack. This is something from the animation industry, and I think it was like a technique that the like vintage Disney animators, that sounds like they're they're a fine wine. These Disney animators that
It's true.
age with time,
Classics.
only get better with age.
Classics.
I think this came out of the old Disney animation days, this flour sack idea, because it was definitely something taught to me in my early animation days. But the idea is you have a flour sack, and if you can get the understanding of the flour sack going and how to pose it and move it in different shapes, then you're absolutely going to be able to apply that to your character. So practice with the flour sack, but always be thinking of the flour sack as you're drawing this character's torsos. Okay, so here we have a flour sack kind of bent over. Here we have a flour sack jumping up into the air. Here we have a flour sack twisting. And if you could figure out that flour sack thing going on there, it's going to help you a ton. I'll apply it to this character here. We have this character, and that middle section is just this flour sack action happening. Sometimes it just helps. Will calls it the bean. He uses it the bean thing, and that's another good way to do it. If you could just think of that shape, really basic, and then add your appendages to it, you're going to get a lot further with your poses. Okay, and then lastly, shoulders and hips. And what you do is you draw an eye, and this line in the middle is the spine, and these two lines, top and bottom, are your shoulder and hip. And one thing that's cool about this is you can hang other shapes on them. So you can add your rib cage, you can add your sort of hip bone area onto that. And then you could build off of those two things. Where those two lines intersect and attach to the spine and to the other shapes, you're going to build your sticks, your arm and leg, stick arm and stick legs off of that. And it's just another easy way to get a pose down really fast. One thing that's important to know is when this spine bends, these shoulders and hips pretty much bend along with it, and they go opposite of one another. So if your shoulders are pointing down on the left side, then your hip is going to be pointing up at the left side. And also when Jake, they twist,
art school bonus question: do you know what it's called formally when they're in that pose? When they're in the tilt?
Didn't go to art school.
Still be a little education for Jake.
Yeah.
Contrapposto.
Contrapposto. Oh, that's my favorite Italian.
It's contrapposto.
Contrapposto. Okay, Will Terry just calling me out. I'm going to call Will out now. Do you know what it is when it's flat, like say an Egyptian drawing where they're on the side of the pyramids and stuff like that? There's no contrapposto.
When it's
contrabengal.
Flat like
when it's flat.
It's flat. That's what
pose of greater dimensions.
Call that flat.
Art history. Boom.
Push
it real good.
Dropping the art school knowledge.
Contrapposto.
Contrapposta, and what was the other one? Pose
of greater dimensions.
Greater dimensions.
Jim says I'll have contrapposto with marinara sauce.
Let me get back to this. You guys have got a lecture to burn through. All right.
Sorry.
So these things are always going to be opposite of each other. Here's an example. They never do this. You're never going to have these things like bending either parallel to each other or counter to what the spine is doing. That's unless you want to break your, you want to draw somebody who just got ran over by a car or something, then you can do that. Okay. So contrapposto, good. No problemo, bad. whatever it's called. Okay. So here we have this pose. And I just want to point out too, like these shoulders are doing the contrapposto, the balanced against each other type of thing. And that is the shoulders and hips. And then lastly, we want to talk about volume. It boils down to this: spheres, cylinders, and cubes. Keep in mind your silhouette and also your straights and curves. Okay. So here we have these three characters again. And when you're fleshing out these shapes and you're trying to add more dimension, I want you to be thinking about these shapes. If it helps to draw them in there, absolutely do that. But just at least be thinking of where the balls are, where the cubes are, and usually typically heads are the balls, or the spheres. The chest area is usually a sphere. And then the hip area, it helps if you think of it as a cube, because it's very much a part of your anatomy that doesn't bend or twist or torque or anything like that. And then your cylinders obviously are your appendages, right? If you could think of them as those shapes, it's going to help you understand how the cloth folds around them, how the shoes and the socks attach and wrap around them, how they're going to move in physical space. Okay. So remember sphere, cylinders, cubes. The next thing I want you to think about is silhouette. I'm going to block these in. Your character should be easy to read in silhouette. And if things are confusing, then you got to change the pose. And I wanted to point out here, well, before we get into that, I just want to point out when you're doing a pose that you have these little areas that are open. And if these areas around them get too close, too tight, like we are in here, sometimes it can make the pose hard to read. So just be mindful of these negative spaces around your character.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But as you can see on these characters here, we've got a few really weird spots, a few really weird overlaps, and they don't work in silhouette. So I shifted them. And by moving this arm down here, you could see now we've got a much better silhouette happen with this guy. And we still maintain that line of action. With this character, instead of having that arm go straight in front of his head and block out his face, just have that arm go around. And now we've got a nice open pose. Okay. So that's silhouette. And then lastly, straights and curves are anywhere you have a curve, you want to balance that out with some straights and some points, right? So here, overall pose here, we've got this nice big long curve. So you're going to have these two things bunching up, and that gives the shape or your pose a little bit more dynamicness. And then individual pieces of your character's anatomy are going to want to maintain some of the straight and curve action to it. So on these legs, anytime we've got a curve, you're going to have a straight opposing the side of it on the opposite side of it. And even in this tail here, nice long slender curve on the back of the tail, but I wanted to balance that with a little bit more of an angle on the inside and with these ears. Okay. And so that is your pose lecture for today. And if there's not any questions, we can get into the draw overs. Do you guys have any questions or anything to add to that?
You did
I just
really
want to
well.
be sure that was an amazing lecture. I just want to be sure me and Will aren't supposed to have something like that.
So where are your lectures, guys?
I feel like that kid in class who shows up and there's this big test and everybody has some booklet that I don't have. And
right.
You've set the bar high, Jake.
That was a high
bar. Gotta do something.
That was a contrapposto bar.
I'm going to stop sharing. Now, this lecture that I showed you guys is going to be available as a PDF. And we're giving that lecture as a PDF to our subscribers at svslearn.com. So that's just going to be a part of your subscription. We'll upload it. You could download that and have it just in your archives I have like a folder on my computer just full of like all these PDF lectures that I've downloaded over the years. So we want to add to that, and you can refer to it easily whenever you want. With that, let's go ahead and fix some people's art. What do you guys think of that?
Let's do
Sounds
it.
like a good idea.
All right. This is Jim Gleason. He is joining us in the chat as well. He said that he is struggling with gestures, so hopefully this will help out a little bit. Okay, so before I get started and start doing demos and stuff, I always like to look at the piece and kind of see, just analyze what the problems is, especially based on, I didn't know Jake was going to be doing that fancy pants lecture. So it gives us some great stuff to talk about in terms of the overall position. But the main two things that I saw is these two things. The overall concept is sort of vague. And that's because these poses haven't been pushed, like Jake was saying, into an intent. So there's no gesture sort of supporting what the concept is. So this was for our critique arena for the rabbit race. And so right now we've got the rabbit fun run happening. You can see that sign up there. Our characters are kind of on this path, and I can't tell because if you look at the gesture, remember Jake was talking about having C curves and S curves. So curves like that. Right now, if you do a gesture line through them, they're all pretty much, all three characters are pretty straight up and down. So I can't tell what their intent is. It almost looks like this guy he's on the road. Is he racing? Is he trying to catch the rabbit? Is he trying to mow him down? And so because their gestures are straight up, it takes away a little bit of their intent. And so that's kind of where I see the problems for this piece. And so that's kind of what I wanted to fix if I can. So in other words, is like a simple sketch version of what we have. So we've got a couple of things that are straight up and down. We've got the actual character, but then also the cars and the props and everything that's in an illustration can be pushed into a little bit of a gesture. For example, you guys have all seen the idea of like a falling ball in animation. You know, which ball feels like it's falling faster? It's going to be this one, right? Because it's got a little bit of weight, so you can change that shape. So right now we've got the car as being sort of a box, and then we've got this straight up and down version of our rabbit. And so that's kind of where I wanted to fix, and I'll show you kind of how I did it. So again, I love going back to the idea of doing of moving things into these basic shapes instead of getting really complicated like the car up here. I think, what have I already drawn? And then how can I make it more dynamic? And so my assumption is the intent behind this rabbit is he's racing on this road and the other rabbits are diving out of the way, and he's already run over the other rabbit back there. And so everything with gesture is I want to push forward. I want the whole thing leaning forward. So not just the rabbit, but also the car. And so like I start to think about the overall car and the rabbit as being a full character together. And so I start trying to push that dynamic shape, even the wheels from going from being a circle to being a forward oval. Everything pushes forward. And all of a sudden you start to get more weight down, and you start to feel that our little rabbit is like trying to do something. And so right now he's just kind of got the road rage a little bit. He's just kind of on the road and he's like, oh, I see that rabbit. I'm going to hit him. And then like Jake was saying, you can push it real good.
Please.
Look at
don't sing.
Sorry, but push it real good. Okay. So if he's leaning forward here, these are the kind of sketches that I do over and over in the beginning of a drawing. Let me back out because I do these real small. And so when I zoom in big, they look terrible. But if he's leaning a little bit forward here, what happens if I lean him all the way over the windshield and really push him forward, get the elbows going up? Now I can't create too much of a silhouette, but if I did, maybe I could get a little bit of a negative space right here in that elbow. If I could create a little triangle right there, maybe. But the whole thing is I really want it just leaning forward. I want him bearing down on this rabbit over here. And so even changing the design of the car to where the smokestack is coming up. So all I'm trying to do is push this dynamic shape. I'm trying to push this triangle. And so even with the exhaust coming out the bottom, you're flattening out that gesture. So the whole thing is a big triangle and the whole thing's leaning forward, if that makes sense. So that gives the rabbit some intent. That's kind of what I would do. And I would lean it into him just being, barreling through there. Cause that's the whole thing that you want to do when you're creating illustration is make somebody really feel what the character's motivation is. And you do want to push it more than I'll stop singing, but you do want to push it because you can see that I love doing the sketches like this because it's sort of there in this first drawing, but then it really starts to move a lot more forward as you go through it and say, okay, what if I lean it more forward? And what if I make him more aggressive and more and more and more? And it starts to work out pretty good. For our rabbits, I've got, again, I just do a basic kind of drawing, and here's the same idea. This character's running, but it doesn't feel like that character's running fast. If you're trying to get out of the way of a car, you are going to be running. And one of the main things I see a lot from students I think this comes from figure drawing, is we always start with the head. Have you guys noticed that? We start with the head and, we draw it like that. And so the natural tendency is to keep the head above the body. Well, the problem is in sports poses and action poses, a lot of times the head goes lower than the body. And so it's an unnatural thing to draw. But leaning into what Jake was saying about the S curve, the second I move that character's head lower than the back of his body, there's all that gesture moving forward. And so you can just play around with that. I mean, there's a million ways you can get into this pose, but just getting the character, instead of it being this direction, now it's fully in this direction. That's the direction it's running. And so you can play with it. You have a huge amount of freedom there to really push a pose and make it look like, I always ask myself, what is this character trying to do? He's trying to get out of the way. It really needs to feel like he's trying to get out of the way. And then lastly, same thing. I've got this like sort of straight up and down gesture. Let me zoom in on this little guy. So here's him. He's just, that straight up and down. He doesn't really have any say in it. Almost like he's sitting there and almost like sort of like a toddler kind of position. And so he's almost in this position. So he's just straight up and down like that. And so you want to think like, okay, what happened to that character? Did he get hurt? Again, moving that head off axis, was he run over? And I do a ton of these little sketches. None of them are art in and of themselves. They're just studies. What happened to this character, and is he mad? Did he bang his knee? Did he sprain his wrist? Did he fully get run over? And you need to answer those questions for yourself, and then the gestures will start to make more sense. You'll start to understand. But moving that head off the top of the body and moving the body around when they're in action poses is going to help a massive amount. So that's kind of how I would fix this one with each of the characters in there.
Good job, Lee.
You did too good. That was too good, Lee.
Yeah, way too good.
Nice.
Yeah, you're gonna make us look bad.
All right, I've got one here from Angelina. And before I start, I just want to tell a really quick story about a video that I saw the other day. A really short video of these two MMA fighters in a worldwide event. And the one fighter got caught in a really weird chokehold by the other fighter. And he got, submitted. He had to tap out. Then they show someone got their phone out and recorded when they went out through the tunnel. They were behind the scenes, and the fighter who lost went up to the other fighter that won and said, "How did you do that? Can you show me that move?" And so that fighter was like, "Sure," and he showed him on his friend. He showed him where to put his arms and how to turn everything. And that fighter was like, "Oh, now show me on me and help me do it," And I thought that is the utmost humility, right? In being able to lose and try to turn it into a learning situation. And that's what I see going on here. And I want to thank the artists who gave us permission to use their art, because it's very humbling to have us show your art and monkey with it and try to fix it. And that's what this whole series is about. Those of you who can, no matter where you are on your art journey, if you can humble yourself, and the same goes for us still. Like, I still struggle with stuff. I will still ask Jake for a draw over. I don't know who Jake asked for a draw over, but you never stop learning. If you can be comfortable with the fact that you can never stop learning, you will grow your skills faster that's the fastest way to grow. In looking at this illustration by Angelina, one of the things that I noticed in here is we've got this rope that they're holding, and I really want to talk about, because Jake really went over these kinds of things with line of action. And this guy here is kind of straight up and down, and this guy is kind of leaning forward. And in order to make a rope taut, you kind of have to pull against it. So I feel like this guy here is going to get pulled this way and tip over. And really, we're talking about mechanics. And then this little guy over here is pulling back, and which is an awkward angle to pull on a rope behind you, right? And so what you really want to do is get your mechanics right first, get your line of actions right, and do something more like this and something more like that, so that they can, you're going to naturally, when someone's pulling on a rope, you're going to naturally want to pull back, and you're going to shift your weight back. Okay. So that's the first thing I see. And then the second thing, like, and Jake kind of went through this already. This is kind of the proportions I see Angelina using, which is the exaggerated large head and really exaggerated small body, which is, you know, kind of that 2.5 heads high, right? Body proportion, which is the same thing that I use, and a lot of artists use that. So if you can imagine your little drawings as a skeleton where you actually have elbows. So like on like this arm right here, I can't really tell where that would be. Now that's okay, because that arm could be really taut, and so maybe we wouldn't see the elbow, but we really need to see, if you really need to be able to draw your characters with that in mind, with everything, you know, that they, you know, with the bone structure and the skeletal structure in mind, and that'll really help your drawing. So I kind of just did these little drawings right here, where if we bring, instead of the arm going backwards, back behind to grab the rope, if we bring that arm forward and grab out in front, we could still hold the flag here. But you'll find that even if you're going to put clothes on this character, you'll be more successful in being able to identify where those body parts go, you know, and you can quickly see if a leg is too long or too short. But that's how I would fix this one, is really getting into the skeletal structure, because what's happening is everything is kind of turning to mush. And what's interesting is this painting reminds me so much of my early work, where I would completely lose my drawing and I would start making it up in the paint. And I feel like that's what's happening on this one, where if we zoom in a little bit, the arm starts to bend, because we've kind of, you know, we've got an arm that kind of does something that it can't really do, rather than saying, well, this is the hand right here, this is the elbow out here.
If you're gonna go that curvy with you got to go all the way.
Yeah, you got to go
whole
all the
thing,
way,
right?
Yeah,
that rubber hose stuff.
Yep, and that's really all that, you know, that I would do on the poses on these, is really change that line of action to put weight so they can't fall over. Mechanically, your illustrations have to work so that your characters aren't going to fall over by being pulled by, you know, on that rope. They need to be pulling against it.
All right, is it my turn?
It is your turn, Jake.
Let's
Parker.
do it. Okay, so here we have Bill's. And the main thing, the reason I pulled this one out of our stack of drawings was I had a hard time with this shape here. And it almost looks like a snake is like slung over this guy's shoulder, like a rattlesnake. And that's something you want to watch out for when you're doing a character design, is any sort of, like, you know, some things that might make sense to you because you're so used to the character, but might not make sense to people who are looking at it for the first time. And oftentimes, to catch these sort of things, you just go into Photoshop, or if you're working traditionally, you can hold up a mirror to it and just flip it. And sometimes you'll see things you didn't notice before. And so it just was hard for me to, like, parse this. Where's his shoulder? Where's his, you know, the back? How does this all work there? So I think overall, though, this pose is okay. It's a nice firm stand. He's like standing there, and he's doing that, you know, bring it on type of thing. But what could we do to fix it a little bit better? So I did a draw over here, and I actually stood him up a little bit taller, so he's standing a little bit more confident. And then you could see here, I really defined shoulder and arm, and I dropped that arm down a little bit, so that you could like differentiate between this shape. Okay. And I think maybe you might even want to do something to like block that, even, if it's not gonna, if you're worried about too much of this line going through there. And then bringing this arm out so we could see this elbow over here as well. And that makes it a little bit more of a clear silhouette, just to have this arm being so obscured by his chest, I think makes this arm look a little stubby. So so this is what I would do, is just break these shapes up a little bit so that we're seeing them more in as their individual shapes than as one whole piece. And then I think with the rabbit here, one thing to watch out for is see how the ears are overlapping, like this. That can get a little busy in places, and so I always like to like open up that space between the ears a little bit, especially for some of these action poses.
Is
So
it?
then
I'm going
we
to throw you a
have,
curveball, Jake. Is it possible
Yeah.
to overlap those ears and make it work?
I think you could do it. I think one of the other problems here is how big this one is versus
Yeah.
how little this one is. So I think if you want to do that, you got to have
Yeah.
that one.
Yep.
You
be a little
still
bit
could
bigger.
create that little
see-
triangle that's in there, in between them, just right there where they come together. Yeah. If you guys notice, when you get a negative space, it almost always creates a triangle. It's kind of uncanny how
Mhm.
many
Yeah.
times it creates a triangle. So I look for those little triangles.
You have two options there. You could really spread them out, or you could overlap it like that. And then I think what you want to do here is have he's really putting on the brakes, have these feet, sticking up like that. And then we could do something with these arms where they're like, screw
Maybe
this up
he's
somehow.
shooting dirt out from the front of his feet if he's put on the brakes that hard.
Yeah, there's going to be dirt coming out like that. There's also going to be like a trail back here like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think where to put these arms.
You could grind his heels down flat so like they've worn off. He's stopping so
actually, I
hard.
think you're going to do like this. You're going to do like this. You're going to do an arm back there like that, and this arm out there like this. And now you've really got this this stopping pose. And then I actually think he should be like astonished, not angry. Anger is for like later.
Yeah, right. The turtle
Possibly.
jumped in his way and now he's surprised.
Yeah. It's like, oh shoot. So that's just what I would do to this one. Again, like Lee was saying, intention is a big part of it.
Mhm.
Just thinking through like what would actually, be happening in this situation. Like expression is a part of it. Silhouette is a part of it. All these little things we're talking about. It's like the golf swing. There's 50 things you got to remember when you do a golf swing. But if you focus on any one thing, you're not going to pull off the golf swing. So it's kind of the same thing with art here.
Same as before, the concept isn't clear based on sort of what's happening with the characters and then some of their proximity to each other and what they're overall doing. And so that's kind of the stuff that I'm going to address. Concept, if we look at our rabbit here, I would say he's out of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because his front wheel has been jabbed by the fox. Is that how you guys are reading that illustration?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of the stick in there. Okay, so there's a couple of problems with that. The fox looks like he's almost just pointing at it because there's going to be a massive amount of force that he needs to jam that thing into. Not that it has to be realistic, but it almost
looks like
he's-
the fox is and this here is a wheel, students.
right. He's kind of pointing at it, lecturing. And so he just doesn't have really any gesture going on at all there for the action that's taking place. So let's start with the rabbit. So if we're going to be out of control, if we look at what's been drawn, there's a couple of things happening. Have you guys heard of the term twinning?
Mm-hmm.
Twinning.
Twinning, yeah, that is not a Charlie Sheen term. That's winning. This is twinning.
Oh boy.
Twinning. That is where you have here. Let me pick a different color. That's where you have two limbs that are sort of mimicking each other, and we've got kind of two different versions of it. They're both in the exact same position.
Right.
One's just on the same side of the body, and this one's on the other side of the body. So they're doing the same thing. So what that creates is a look of control. You know, if you know, a swimmer, like a high diver, I don't know what you call it. Somebody who jumps off a high dive swimmer,
swimming diver.
When they're in control, everything's all tucked in and symmetrical, right? And that's an easy way to think about it. But if they hit the top of the diving board when they're coming down, everything starts to flail, right? And so that's if the mental picture I like to have in my head for that. And so we want to create you know, like Jake was saying, a lot of separations with silhouettes and the character moving. And then also we've got the abrupt stop of the motorcycle itself, which means the rabbit is going to be pitched in this direction. And so right now he's just kind of up and down, even though it's good that they do have the head lower than the body. Like I was saying before, we need to start to feel that force going this way. So, you know, using what Jake called a swoop, I call it a C curve. I'm going to start leaning on that. But even when I get over here into this drawing, it's so natural to twin. Look, I've made a mirror image of the feet and then a mirror image of the hands. And so you can see, you know, as you start to draw this, these are the micro changes that I make by having this foot go this way, this foot go that way, this arm come this way, and this one go this way. And so, you know, even the hand could kind of change position there. And those are the micro differences that are going to make something seem out of control versus in control. Even this one, like just a quick sketch that I did, look how easy it is to naturally twin the body. It's one of the most common things. It's hard not to do it, actually. You almost have to think about it to not do it. So, and the last thing I was going to say about the rabbit is, you know, if you look here, when the eyes are anchored onto the bottom or any part of the eye, it's going to look a little bit more controlled than when the eye is up a little bit and you create just a little bit of space. It's going to look still looking in a direction, but it's going to make him start to look scared. So these are just such small little things, but they all equal being in control or out of control. And so you can play with those ideas. Now the fox, we need him to be sneaky and we needed him to be active and devious. And so those are kind of the keywords that I think of Mr. Fox. And so, you know, I just think of him, if he's going to do this move over here, he's going to have to be pretty well hidden and sneaking into the scene. And so that's, you know, I'll start to even make those keywords like sneak and hidden and all that kind of stuff. So I always use these keywords, and then I just have him barely coming out there and really kind of jamming the, you know, something. This also looks almost like a pool cue. I figure he would probably grab something from the brush that he's in, being a fox and all. So, so I kind of just give him a stick. And then, you know, once you have one shot, then you can start to take that same shot. You know, right now you got the back view of him. A lot of people don't like to draw the back view of a main character in a scene. So, you know, you could have him kind of coming out and kind of swooping around a little bit. And I added the same rabbit that I drew up here, just added him to the scene. So now the fox is jamming the wheel, pitching the rabbit, and he's out of control. You know, you could even make pieces coming off the motorcycle at that point too, to make it seem even more, you know, treacherous and dangerous for the rabbit.
It's that reach, that long action line of reach that really sells the trying to shove a stick in there.
So those are kind of the changes I would make, but it really does come down to, you know, what are these characters doing? How do I want them to feel? Write it out, literally write the words, and then start the drawing, and it'll help you a ton.
So Lee, did you pull from your bank of memorized images? Did you get reference? Like, because like when I look at this piece, it looks like kind of like three different illustrations. It looks like the rabbit was drawn more from memory, and it looks like there's more reference used on the fox and the motorcycle. But you just start drawing these things and it all makes sense, but it's hard for someone who doesn't know how to do that.
just dealing with the sort of some just really basic kind of shapes like that flour sack. So the fox is that same. Both these characters are actually the same exact character. Let's have him pointing out here, hand on hip. So it's sort of this basic shaped character, and you just need a couple of these kind of characters. If you have a silhouette for the body, or sorry, a cylinder for the body, and just break it like that. And you got to break at the elbows. It's that same kind of shape, and then you just add the details that make it either a rabbit or a fox. And so it really is sort of this generic character, and then you add the stuff that makes it a fox or an elephant or whatever, and you can change the scale of all those shapes. But it's a really, really basic character design, just like that bean that Will uses, but with legs and arms, and then you just add the stuff. And
my advice to Juliet is, what Lee really did was turn the character into a human. So every animal, if you think that they're a human, and then you add the elements of a fox or a bunny or whatever it is,
right,
you'll be more successful. And in your illustration, it looked like you're thinking fox, and how do I make this fox stand there and do the pose? But a fox could not do that. A fox absolutely can't grab a stick because they don't have a thumb, and their arms, like
you have some freedom.
Don't try this, but you can't lift a dog up by its legs. It's not the same as us. Its skeleton won't hang from its arms. It'll actually hurt it really bad. So you really, in order to be successful in anthropomorphizing an animal, you have to basically just make it a human character and then add the elements of the animal. Yeah. So this was one by Diana, and again, I want to really thank her for letting us use her artwork here. And what I see here is just, again, we're talking about posing, and the main problems that I see on this one are, we've got 3 rabbits, and they're all pretty much in the same pose, and they're all running, but the pose is kind of awkward, because even though in a run cycle of a rabbit, there will be a time where the feet are leaping off the ground like this, and the legs are in that position. But all 3 of them doing it all at the same time is distracting. So I would vary that. And then the carrot, to me, looks like it's doing more of a dance step than running away. And to fix
a Bollywood dance.
Yeah, kind of, and the thing is, the easiest thing you can do, or the best thing you can do, is get reference. So get reference of a human doing the action that you want the carrot to do. Make it a human. What's that?
I'm gonna interject something there. Those rabbits running, and I don't know if this is true, but it feels like those were drawn from very specific, like a dog race photo reference. And so in this situation, possibly did use reference, but I think the point that Will's making is it all depends on the reference that you're using too. Like,
so not all reference is appropriate for every situation, so I would base that, and it could be exaggerated. The stride could be lengthened. You could outstretch this foot here and really kick this one back and really exaggerate that run, but it does need to stay in the realm of running. And then for the rabbits, I just got some reference here. And one of the things that I do sometimes for myself when I'm trying to get a pose is I'll just draw over, and we have a class on posing characters where we go over this, but identifying that bean shape, and the overlap, and the and how what does that torso look like, and where's the center line, and and the head attaching, and you can then exaggerate the limbs. You can identify where everything's happening here, right? And then here's the front leg, and the front leg actually attaches up there, goes down, and then you have the foot. And then this one's kind of, I would change that a little bit and make the foot kind of like that. And then you've got this other foot right here, and I would bring that over a little bit, so that we're not getting too bunched up. And you could add a tail. You could even bring this leg, if the run is like crazy running faster, you could bring this leg out, so and then you have like the feet out in front, right? And then you tuck these legs back behind, and mine's not
the
very
more
good.
foreshortened your angle, the harder this is. As you can tell, even as Will's doing that and trying to clear a silhouette, it's so hard to do it from that angle. And
It
so,
is. But you just move things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing on this one. You kind of have this thing going on here and the head here. And then on this, we've got this nice line of action coming down here. We got little feet out here. I might separate them, looking at it like that. And then back here, I might take this right here and then bring this foot up like that, and then bring that foot under there, and then put the shadow down here. And the reason for that, if I get rid of the reference here really quick, is anything in the air looks like it's moving more. And if you have, again, this, where you anchor them to the ground, they just don't feel like they're running as much. It makes it feel like it's, I don't know, to me, it's stopped in motion more than a fluid movement. So I wouldn't choose that pose. I would get good reference and choose a different pose.
So you could see this one, and can anybody guess why I picked this one to be fixed? Can anybody look at this and guess what needs to be changed here? It's got a clear silhouette. It has a very clear, proportions are nice. It's a pretty nice character design. I'm not going to worry about this guy here, but I think the thing that this just needs is way more pushing it real good.
It's good, but what we're trying to do in illustration is exaggerate things and make things exciting.
Yeah,
the ordinary world is just not that exciting.
This is just like, it's a good concept too. It's like the carrot that's he's been trying to get the whole time is now getting eaten by some squirrel on hanging from a drone, no less, at the finish line. Oh, look who's running it, the other squirrels. I'm not sure why. I guess they wanted to think there's a lot going on here, but to really sell this, you can't just have them be like, oh, you really have to push this character. And so what I got here is this is my like very loose draw over. This is him like reaching for it, trying to get it. Like everything is pushing towards trying to get that thing. And so just building on top of that, sketch it in a little bit. This is me fleshing it out a little bit more. I'm going to put that so you could really see. And now look at the difference between which one of these rabbits really wants that carrot out of the two of them. This one or this one, just that pose can make such a huge difference in how your image, the whole emotion, the whole concept behind it is perceived. So if you think you can push it, if you think you can't push it any further, you probably still can. You always push it until you break it and then dial it back a little bit more. I think that's it for today. This lecture is going to stay on YouTube. The PDF download for the lecture that we made, so you can have that in your files for reference, is available to subscribers at svslearn.com. Or you can sign up hit the link in the chat and also in the description to just get it emailed to you if you don't want to become a member of SVS Learn. But SVS Learn right now is having a 2-week free trial for our Foundations program. What's so good about the Foundations program, Lee?
It is custom built to walk you step by step through the whole thing, and it's made for functionality. It's not made to just fill up your time.
Go ahead, Will.
That is the problem unfortunately at art schools. If you talk to any illustration faculty administration group, they will always say they're always bothered by their Foundations program that they have no control over.
Right.
it's a waste of time often because it feeds into every art discipline. It feeds into photography, graphic design. So they have to make it super general. And basically it's not specific enough, and it ends up wasting time for illustrators, waste time for photographers, waste time for graphic designers and industrial designers and all those guys. So ours is specifically designed for illustrators.
So what you're going to do is you're going to go to svslearn.com, click on curriculum just to see if this is something that you need, that you want. And these take you from very basic stuff to, towards the end here, you're going to be learning how to do environment design, interior environment design, developing great visual stories, building backgrounds for characters, painting texture and details. All great classes by Lee, Will, and I. And we have some other like really good guest teachers coming in here to do some very specific things. This is, I don't know, we've heard from so many people, this is one of the best spends they've done for the price and for the time invested. So, you go on YouTube and you're like, well, how do I draw an eye? How do I draw a character? How do I draw a pose? And you can learn a lot of this stuff, but you're not going to learn it the right steps at the right time in the right order. And that's what we've done here. Very specific. So if you don't want to waste time, this is like the way that you want to go with that. And everyone who signs up for these foundations do get our PDFs that we're going to be releasing here for how to fix your art. But just a quick plug there for for svslearn.com before we head out. Just want to thank everybody for joining us today at what are we calling this? How to Fix Your Art. And I think we're going to call it good for today.
All right.
Bye, you guys.
Thank you, guys.